All right, Kevin McCullough coming to you from Lower Manhattan. AFR Talk, AFA Today is the broadcast, and we are always grateful that you're with us. Are you praying through the year with us? Pray2014.com is where you can get each week's prayer focus. We launched this week's yesterday, and the prayer focus for the week, according to Pray 2014, is pray that we will abide in the will of God, because he that abides in the will of God will be forever. That's the key. If we're in God's will, if we understand God's will, if we're applying God's will, then we will be with him forever. That's a promise from Scripture. But our prayer is, Lord, let me pick and choose the things. Help me make wise choices. Help me choose to abide in your will. And that's what we're doing. And if you did not get this week's prayer focus, you can still sign up for that at pray2014.com, pray2014.com, and then pray through the week as we go through these focuses together. All right. The story that I opened with, the Benghazi situation, is highlighted by a couple of other things in the news today. One is there is even yet one more side deal to Iran that we did not know about, that has to do with the successful conclusion of the, quote, peace agreement there, in which 6 countries and Iran all sat around the table. And as best as I can tell, even in the light of the new agreement, all that they said was, you got to give us your pinky promise, your pinky swear, that you won't go out and make any more centrifuges. And there's this 31-page document that's now separate from the agreement itself that kind of details this kind of secret formula, et cetera, that everyone has to follow. Oddly enough, the top imam in Iran out today talking about how they made the Western nations curl under, that the West has completely buckled, and that this was a complete victory for Iran. He also said, and we'll get into this at some point, but make everything clear. There will be no stopping of enrichment. Now, a few weeks ago, someone, and I believe it was on this very broadcast, said, you watch, they're not going to stop enriching anything. If anything, this is going to give them a window of time to accelerate stuff. But while the West is being told and spoken with nice words about and said, oh, yes, you're our friend, they're laughing at you on the other side, and they're enriching the uranium anyway. Why is that important in connection to Benghazi? Well, let me add one more thing to this. Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense, is, of course, out on his book tour. And he's talking about the most controversial passages in his book, specifically that in which he claimed the president didn't seem all that engaged in the fight against terrorism. Well, in Iran, we're letting the terrorists continue their enrichment while we tell the American people that there's a deal. So we tell the Americans one thing, we know that Iran's doing something else. That's on the president. Then in Benghazi, what we are finding out is that they knew from the very beginning. They knew from the very beginning, minutes into it, according to the reports this morning. High-level Pentagon officials briefed other high-level Pentagon officials that then went and met with the president directly. And they didn't talk about some sort of spontaneous protest, and that was never anybody's idea on any of the slates. From the very get-go, what this was a terrorist attack. From the very get-go, that's what they knew. That's how they discussed it. It was in the aftermath of all of the revelations that they came up with this theory to then peddle to the American people 5 days later, that they would convince that they could tell us what this was and we would go along with it. I think Bob Gates' assertions are probably accurate. I think these headlines pretty much demonstrate this is not an administration that's entangled with the war on terror. They're keeping it very much at a distance, and they're not all that concerned about it, which seems to me to be fairly problematic. Because if Iran's going to continue enrichment, then the very least that we should be doing is watching them to make sure what they do with those enriched particles. But no, we're giving them time off. We've promised to play nice, and so have they. 888-589-8840. It's Kevin McCullough. I want to talk with you about this. Let's go first to Buddy, calling from Texas. Hi, Buddy. Thanks for your patience. You're on with Kevin McCullough.
Thank you for taking my call, Kevin. God bless y'all. And I have been praying for you guys.
Thank you.
I had a comment to say. It was, I hope the president is watching the news, or at least gets the newspaper tomorrow so he can find out what's going on. God bless y'all. Bye.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you remember in the IRS scandal. Oh, I don't know anything about this. I only know what I've been finding out from the news. In the Benghazi matter, I don't know if he ever said exactly when or how he heard. But one thing is for sure, we now know from declassified documents out today that there were Pentagon officials that were immediately briefed and then sent to the White House to update the president. And there was no mention of a video, and there was never any mention of any protest. This was a full-on terrorist attack from the very beginning. 888-589-8840. Your thoughts on the configuration of all these three things I've kind of shuffled into the deck together. But our response to Benghazi, our response to Iran, the secret deals we worked out with Iran, and then Secretary of State Gates' assertions that the administration is, they just don't seem to have any passion. You know what else he went on to say? The only military issue that the president did show passion about was don't ask, don't tell. Overturning don't ask, don't tell was actually important to the president, and therefore the assertion was made that he passionately fought for it. But the surge, he didn't really want to do that. He wanted to bring all the troops home. He just felt like, from a political standpoint, he would look a little too exposed if he did that. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's talk to Joe in Pennsylvania. Hi, Joe. Joe, are you there?
Pennsylvania. Yes. Hey, I agree with what you're saying. This president seems to be a very big wimp, or maybe even actually helping the terrorists. But the Benghazi thing, to me, that's not the real issue, is who knew what and how soon they knew. My issue is, why didn't they help when they could? That's like having a daycare on fire with kids trapped inside and the people outside standing there arguing, well, how did the fire start? Was it an accident or was it arson? Instead of calling the fire company and letting the fire company do their job. You know, they had hours to get in there and get them out. To me, that's where the president needs to be held accountable at first, for letting those people die when they could have prevented it. Thank you for your time. I'll listen off the air because I'm in a truck. Thank you.
All right, Joe. I appreciate your call. The interesting thing about that, and let me just be very blatantly clear back to you, and I appreciate the very forthrightness with which you assessed that. Yes, the response time was crucial, was critical. We knew that there was something going down, and then hours go by. You don't know where the president is. He's not. To this day, he's never admitted where he was during those hours. So you've got lower level minions running around trying to make decisions. Nobody is allowing action to be taken. Finally, the Navy SEALs storm off from the bunker and they go rescue the ones they could. They couldn't find the ambassador. It turns out he was almost dead from smoke inhalation at the time. But the challenge and the reason I connect this to Iran is, are we not setting up almost an identical scenario? We know that Iran has said they have dangerous weapons and they want to do dangerous things. We know that they want to attack our only ally in the region. We know that they would prefer to wipe that ally completely off the face of the earth. And again, we're not divining these things. These are things that they've openly said. I generally trust madmen when they say that they want to do bad things. They usually have gone ahead and done them. Ironically, the kind of hands-off approach to Iran and not taking action while we can is exactly mirroring that of Benghazi, when we took our hands off of that and said, well, hey, collateral damage, we may just lose those guys. There was no sense of urgency. There's no sense of immediate importance to deal with. And I feel like there's this huge blind spot that either the administration purposefully practices or is ideologically driven by. And I wonder what you think. Is it ideological or is it a blind spot? 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. A lot of you want to weigh in on this, and I'm grateful that you care. James is calling from Virginia. Hello, James. Welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough.
All right, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a Marine Corps vet, a war vet, and a few months ago I found this station. I'm going to try to be quick. It's just really been a blessing. I just want to encourage you, and I want to thank this ministry and this information that you're always standing in the gap for, for being good. The good men are just few and far between. So the information that I get, I pass on to an apologetics class, but from the outside, still looking in, politics hasn't been such a huge thing until, like I said, a few months of God leading me to the station. And it just doesn't make sense with all the things that are known facts with the president, his overall just character and his disposition in certain matters. This morning, a comment was made that the majority leader of the House or whatever wouldn't even allow an impeachable thing to be brought forth. I mean, how is it possible that all these issues are like this, and it just seems like a lack of no concern for the majority of the American public that these things continue to go on. And the last thing is, I guess, is that I think overall that it's more important to these politicians now to hold a seat instead of the forefathers where it was making an impact on a nation and a history. And these guys are more interested in the perks and everything that comes with politics. And I think the enlisted that I served with and everything else, it's disgusting. So I thank you for your time. I'm going to hang up, man. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, James. I appreciate your encouragement, and thank you for listening, and thank you for allowing your mind to be impacted by what we're discussing and to actually take action on it, because it is one thing to know the truth. It is another thing to practice it. And please hear me out on this, friends. I am not saying that I believe in any way, shape, fashion, or form that these problems will be solved ultimately by politics. I don't think if you wear an R or a D on your shirt, that makes you any better or worse a person. But I will tell you one thing. There are people that are investing billions of dollars in an effort to keep us confused about the truth every single day. So what I want to do is I want to obliterate that confusion. I want to replace it with truth, and I want to amplify what that truth says. I want to make sure we know what that truth is, and then we shout it from the mountaintops. And then I want us to pursue clarity and living lives based in clarity beyond that. I think if we do that, our country will come back on its own. It's not going to come back on its own just to say, well, you got to all go vote for the Democrats, or you got to all go vote for the Republicans. No, any small group of people that have too much power wielded and too concentrated of a base, they're always going to abuse it. It doesn't matter which party you're from. What is important is that you are acting on the core values of who you are and what you should be about. And in America, that's always meant certain things. I don't know if it still does. I'm fearful that we will be either inept or absent when our allies in the Middle East, specifically Israel, do understand that it is the time to stand together and to do something because of this administration's fear of being perceived in some way by somebody about something. We have to decide, are we going to be a people of principle? Are we going to stand as a nation for principles? Or will we be the, oh, I hope they like me group? Because we've been a lot of that in the last few years, and it really hasn't worked out that well. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let me go to Bill in Indiana. Hi, Bill. Welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you. The Benghazi investigation. This thing must continue, as far as I'm concerned, until we get some correct answers instead of all the flim-flam we've been getting. My own theory as to what happened to the president that night, I think he was in the Situation Room watching this whole thing on live TV. That's only a guess, obviously. I don't know. And, of course, he was very anxious to get away out west the next day. where presumably there are fewer reporters out there to ask embarrassing questions. Again, I'm guessing, but I do know.
Yeah, in fact, the event that he was scheduled for the next day was a big fundraiser for his presidential, or it was a fundraiser of some sort. It wasn't for the presidential campaign because it was too late in the season for that.
You can't miss fundraisers.
But it was coming up on the election, so I think it was campaign-related in some way. Yeah, and he had to get out of town real quick to get to Vegas the next day.
That's my impression.
Yeah.
Also, let me add a few words on this Obamacare thing. I'm 82 years old. I've been fighting this thing since I found out what they were talking about, and I knew that this Rube Goldberg contraption could not function, and I don't believe anybody else is stupid enough to think it could. I think the thing was designed to fail.
Well, there's a lot of people wondering if the failure is designed, if it is intentional, if it is forthright. Is the destruction of America really the goal of the modern progressive leftist movement? At least the America that was able to wield its power for the cause of good in the past. I mean, I guess we can reshuffle the deck and come up with a different kind of nation and still call it America, but it won't really be what America was, right? It's 40 minutes past the hour. We're going to continue with more of your calls next on these pieces of the puzzle that are all being put together that add up to a very worrisome picture for me of the administration and what it is doing about bad guys in the world and what it wants to do about bad guys in the world. Stay with us. Kevin McCullough, AFA Today on AFR Talk.